And welcome to the HBYOB Brewcast, where we talk about beer, where we drink beer, where we talk about making beer. Tonight, we're going to be discussing Guinness Draught. So join us. And welcome to the HBYOB Brewcast, where tonight we're going live for the first time on our YouTube channel. I'm joined tonight by Chris Allen, and I'm also joined by the owner of the HBYOB homebrew store here in Dayton, Ohio, Joey Brumley. Bring you in first, Chris. How you doing this evening?
I can't complain, Mark. How you been, man?
I'm doing fine. The good thing is I know that you haven't had a drink yet.
Not yet.
We're reviewing. You've learned the rules after one show. That's good.
Give me a minute. I mean, you guys got to watch me this entire time so I don't crack it while we're talking.
Quick learner, quick study.
Right.
I like that.
Trying.
Joey, owner of HBYOB, how are you doing this evening?
I'm good. How are you, Mark?
I'm doing good. Ready to get the show started. Like I said, tonight, as we discussed last episode, we're going to be reviewing drinking. I think we're going to try to get away from the word review, more just our opinions, give you an idea of our taste, what we like in different beers. But we're doing the Guinness Draught Stout, kind of get us ready for the holiday here in a couple weeks for St. Patrick's Day. You guys ready to drink a stout this evening?
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if I'm ready, but I mean, Guinness isn't my favorite, but we'll do it.
All right, that's fine. I think that's the idea, to get our opinions of different things. Like I said, I haven't had a Guinness since, like I said, it's been a long time. And actually, probably the last time I had a Guinness, I wasn't drinking any what I would call, higher or better quality beer. So I'll be honest, I'm a little more excited about this one than some of the others, just because I haven't had it in a while. Just kind of curious how my palate has changed.
Oh, look at you using big words like palate. I mean, I wouldn't have even have gone there. But I mean, when we talked last week, I think the last time, or what I was telling you guys, the only time I'll have a Guinness is on St. Patty's Day, and that's after a few other adult beverages throughout the day. So I normally don't really have a chance to taste Guinness, if you catch my drift. So this will be different, having this as my first drink rather than, my last one.
Right. I know around here, a lot of the bars, they do green beers, but usually the green beers are usually a Budweiser or Bud Light.
Exactly. Yeah.
So if you want a real Guinness, you're not going to get a green.
Right. So I figured we might as well give it a shot. We'll see how it goes.
Sure. Well, I know Joey said last week he doesn't even like stout. So, in your stout repertoire, when's the last time you had a Guinness?
Are you talking about me?
Yeah.
Oh, I think we discussed the last show. I've got about probably 3 out of 5 gallons in my basement that I made about, I think, 6 or 7 months ago, still hanging out in a kegerator.
And like I said, I think we talked off the thing. I need to get a growler of that. We need to just review it. That way we can get it empty for you, so you can put something new in there.
Yeah, I've got 4 beers on tap right now. It's definitely the one that just keeps lingering around.
Why you're saying that? Why don't you, when you say you have it on tap? I know different home brewers do different things, because I've went through that process. There's bottling versus kegging or corny. Are you when you say you have it, on tap or I mean, you're using cornies also, is that correct?
Yeah, being that the stout that I have is a home brew, so I do keg most of mine, and I use a repurposed soda keg.
And do you sell those at the store, and you have this, the stuff to show somebody or tell somebody how they can do a keg of 5 gallons versus, I'm trying to think, it's been a while. How many bottles would that be?
So it's roughly 53 12-ounce bottles. Most home brewing kits usually revolve around 5 gallons. I think partly just because most of they call them logs or 6 barrels, I think it is, but it's typically 5 gallons.
Right. And I know, I said, I got my cornies from a pop company that went out of business in the area or closed. And that's where I've got mine. Is the 5 gallon corny, is that something, can you buy those still brand new? Is there someone manufacturing that particular, item, or are they all refurbished type units?
So they make new ones now. It's just that most of a long time ago, the used ones were more popular. Now that almost all the soda companies have pretty much switched to box in a bag or whatever it's called for their soda syrups. Now the brand new ones are actually catching up in price with the used ones because the used ones are getting hard to find. And even if you do get the used ones, are typically pin lock, which is a little bit more not complicated, but more rare. People switch them over. So we have them at the store and they are nice to have, but you're kind of on your own as far as luck goes with them. I do recommend that you get replacement gaskets and you clean it very thoroughly before you use a used one.
What about you, Chris? What method do you use?
As of right now, I'm like half of I got 1 foot in the door of kegging, and then the other foot is like outside, because I still like to bottle. I like to bottle mostly just so I can transport it from place to place. Like if I'm going down to, maybe Joey's to play cards, or, over to a buddy's or a party or something like that, and I want folks to try what I've got. I like having the bottles. And for some of the folks that, I've started talking to, through Twitter, fantasy football and whatnot, there's some analysts that I've sent some bottles to for some homebrew and whatnot. So I do like that aspect of it, but at the same time, I like keeping some of the stuff for myself because some of the things that I like to brew, I like to drink. So I do have 1 keg, and I'm actually in the market right now for a fridge that I can turn into a kegerator. But the funny thing is, when it comes to buying, one of those old fridges, nowadays folks are trying to sell those things for way more than what they're actually worth, just because they know homebrewers like to use those and then refurbish them into kegerators. So those old fridges that are really only worth maybe $40-50, and they're probably only got about maybe a year or 2 left on their lifespan, they're trying to sell them for $100, $120, because they know that's they're in a fairly decent demand for folks like myself that just want it to maybe store a couple of kegs and a CO2 tank in it, and have some homebrew some cold homebrew when they like.
Right. Well, when I did it more regularly, I went to corny mainly because cleaning bottles was the part I just didn't. The cleaning part of brewing was the part I didn't like the most, and obviously it's also one of the more important parts. So I actually switched, to cornies. Just obviously it's easier to clean 1 5-gallon container than 53 12-ounce ones. But also once I did it, I really this being a draft beer person, I just thought there was something, flavor wise, I thought it tasted better. Obviously not as convenient necessarily to, go to the back fridge where I stored it, but I bought a few pitchers, and you fill up a pitcher at dinner time. I thought, again, just for cleaning reasons, and I thought there was a better taste because I could control the carbonation during the process of serving versus at the beginning, where once you put the carbonation in the bottle, you're kind of limited to whatever you get.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's one of the trade-offs, one of the big trade-offs that you have when it comes to bottling versus kegging, because like you just said, when it comes to actually being able to sit down and, and drink your beer, you've got to go through the whole process of sanitizing your bottles. You got to cap them all. You got to make sure, you don't wind up with extra beer all over the floors. You're transferring your beer from your bucket to each of your bottles. Whereas with kegging, you can just dump all the stuff in there, kick on the CO2 tank, and just wait a few days, and there you go.
Right. Yeah, I know last time I was at Joey's store, he showed me the, and I think we'll talk about it here in a show here in the next couple of weeks, because I'm really interested in the all-in-one container where you can do everything in one device, and then obviously from there, I would assume you can take it directly to your 5-gallon corny. And you're ready to serve. So you're just at that point using and cleaning only two devices. Would that be correct, Joey?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, the bummer of the all-in-ones is while it's fermenting in your also brew pot, you can't make any more beer. So you're at the mercy of waiting for it to finish or transferring it to a secondary. No big deal. I would say that kegging is one of those things that I think most home brewers that stay home brewers long-term get into kegging just because it does save you cleaning, sanitizing, filling, capping, 53 bottles, stow them away under some place, let them, naturally carbonate. So most people do switch to kegging. It is a lot easier in ways. The bummer with kegging is you almost need a designated beer refrigerator of some sorts at that point. At that time, we have the different parts to make keezers. There's a lot of different options you can go with it. Like right now, I found a cheap used refrigerator on Craigslist, and that turned into my beer fridge.
Right. And I know we've been discussing this week about how to, take smaller amounts of beer, talking growlers, pressurized growlers. I bought a CO2 or a cap that allowed me to pressurize a 2-liter pop bottle. Back in the day, I could put roughly not quite 2 liters of beer into just an old clean 2-liter pop bottle and carbonated enough to keep it pressurized to go to a party or something like that. That worked pretty well, I thought.
So
it was inexpensive.
Most people, when they make the switch to kegging, the number one question I get is, well, what if I want to enter my beer into a competition, or what if I want buddies to share my beer? I'm kind of landlocked to my kegs being at home, right? And honestly, if you fill up a growler, put the cap on while it foams over the top, you will get plenty of carbonation. I would even say it would last weeks, if not months, as long as you don't open it. Once you've brought it to your buddy's house and you've opened it and poured your first glass, then you're kind of committing to drinking the whole growler at that point.
Right. And again, I think I don't know if you remember my setup. I was using, which for 2 reasons, just cost back in the day when we were starting out. I used CO2 from paintball guns. So they were smaller. Now the advantage to that is, which I did one time, I took a whole 5-gallon corny like you. I had a batch that maybe had 3 gallons left, and it wasn't something I preferred. Took it to a party, filled it, put it in a little container where I could put ice around it. By having those smaller CO2 can from, like I said, just from a paintball gun with an adapter kit I bought, I was able to take it to a party, and, everyone came around and filled a glass, thought it was cool that they were, getting a craft beer right from a keg right at the party. And, obviously we emptied it. So it was fun.
Well, what's weird about those is I don't fill the CO2 canisters at the store. We do fill 5 pound, 2.5 pound, up to 20 pound at the store. Mm-hmm. Just because I have heard, I don't know if there's any truth to it. Some of the paintball, not the paintball canisters, the people who fill the paintball guns, I've heard mix the CO2 with oil, which helps lubricate the paintball guns. For that reason, I don't risk the fact of getting potentially oils into my system for filling. So I just choose not to do the paintball canisters. I don't know if it's true. I've read it on the internet and I've heard it from people, but it's just not something I risk at this time. We do sell, it's like a keg charger, and it holds the little 16-gram cartridges like pellet guns take. Those work great for taking to parties, pack it on ice. I did it Christmas Eve. I went to my parents' house, packed a keg on ice, and then just use those little, like I said, 16-gram. You just hooks up to the ball lock connection, and you just charge it that way.
Okay, and that small of a container is enough, or do you just take extras? Is one enough for a keg, or do you just have to take one? And
that's what I was going to ask. How long would something like that last?
Well, what's weird is, believe it or not, the beer itself will push out probably 3 or 4 glasses before you need anything. Just the carbonation that's in the beer.
Pressure, right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then I just kind of give it a blast. But in all honesty, it probably takes 2 of them to get through a whole keg. When I go to parties, I take just like a 2.5 gallon keg, or growlers, like I said. But the times I do take a full 5-gallon, it does work. So it works out great. But again, before we go further, let's crack this beer.
Oh, let's do that. Yeah, let's do that.
All right. I'm doing mine's bottles. I have been, again, back to knowing a stout now. I have set mine out now for a little bit. I kind of wanted mine, not necessarily room temperature, but didn't want it.
So I'm with Chris. It's probably not my favorite beer ever, but there is something to be said for the pour of it.
I mean, looks pretty to me.
It is probably the prettiest glass.
Now, I guess I can pull up their website. I'm pretty sure, based on advertising and stuff, isn't this one of the most popular beers in the world?
Where's the fucking widget?
It wouldn't surprise me.
Does yours have a widget, Chris?
No, I don't think they've had a widget for years.
Has it been that long?
Yeah.
Mine just looks like a regular carbonated beer.
Okay.
Oh, wait.
What's
I hear
it
something
supposed to look like?
line.
It's got that perfectly white. It's got the perfectly white, dense, creamy head. Mine just looks like a regular beer.
It is a regular beer.
Yep. Yeah, if you can hear that.
See?
Yeah, I've got one down at the bottom of the can.
Okay.
Put yours in the camera, Chris. I bet you yours don't look tan like mine does.
Mine is like a dark. Beer.
Yeah.
Look at you can see his cascading.
Yeah. Mine cascading.
So yours is more carbonated. So the can, Chris, put your can up. Is your can? Are you drinking the draft? Not the. Yeah. Okay. Draft stout. What? Does it say anything on the can as far as? See, I've had other stouts. Joey, what are you calling it? That's in there because I've had other stouts that have that.
It's a widget. It just looks like a little plastic, like. It's like a without being graphic. It's just a white plug.
Right, but I just thought it was in there more or less just to kind of like a BB's in a paint can. It was just there. You shake it around, move it around before you open it, let it sit a second, and it just build up a little more carbonation.
Because that was one of the, I guess, the more enticing parts of drinking a Guinness was you could see that cascading like as you poured it.
Did you get that?
I got it when I was pouring mine. You'll have to go back and rewatch the video because you could see mine like as I filled it up.
I thought I saw it, and
so
I'm disappointed. I got.
Okay, but have you taken a drink yet?
Yes, tastes like Guinness.
Pretty much.
Okay, but still, I'm not. Again, you guys are just such rule breakers. The look of it. If I was a 18-year-old child, which when I was 18, you could drink.
Oh wait, hold on. I gotta get festive. I'm gonna get festive with it too. I got a hat to go with it for the occasion. I was looking for some St. Patty's like gear that we might have from past years. This is the closest I could get. So I'm ready to rock and roll.
What do they call those?
I don't even know what they're called.
A derby. I've been, as long as I've known it, I've called that hat a derby. That could be wrong.
Oh, okay.
I put one on in the store once. My wife said take that off.
We're not very good at telling people early on in the show where they can find us. One, we are live on YouTube right now. If you just go to HBYOB's YouTube page, you can click on our live stream. You'll see us there. If you go to Spreaker.com in the search box, same thing, type HBYOB, will come right up as a live stream audio. You can find Facebook page is HBYOB. Joey, what Twitter is that? HBYOB 937?
Yep.
So you can find us there. If you want to tweet me during the show, I'm just, my Twitter's at just a fantasy fan. And Chris, if someone wanted to get a hold of you right now, and where would they get a hold of you?
You can blow up my timeline at Chris Allen FFWX.
Oh, with that hat on, I definitely want to blow up your timeline.
Oh, absolutely. I'm waiting for some pictures or something like that to pop up on my feed in the next couple of days.
All right. Now, like I said, the YouTube channel, we have a chat there, and the Spreaker audio channel, there's a chat there. So anybody wants to chime in on Chris's hat, they're more than welcome.
So
I'm not taking it.
I look good.
I'm not going to say, hey, I think, but I would be curious.
Look at his beer. It looks so good. Look at it. Look, Chris, show your beer. That's what I think it's about Guinness.
I mean, this one looks good, man.
See how? look at that. Look at mine. That's
I've yet to drink.
It's carbonated like a regular beer.
But let's go back to the beginning. Hold on. Back to the beginning.
Nitro, my ass.
I don't have the Nitro. Mine is just the draft. I think you would have had to buy the Nitro. I did not. I have just the draft stout. I think the aroma is very good. Like I said, I've not drank mine yet. Still have a little bit of a head on mine. I think this is right around 4% alcohol.
They're not known for being very high in alcohol, which
it's like 4.2 somewhere.
Which is what a lot of people get confused on. Is a lot of people go, "Oh, it's dark beer, it's high in alcohol." I shouldn't say most of the time. A lot of people assume just because it's dark beer, it's high in alcohol. Guinnesses are actually, well, I'm not drinking what I remembered and fell in love with, but they're usually not known for being very high in alcohol.
Do you know where that started? Because I've heard the same thing where folks have assumed that because it's darker, it's supposed to be higher in alcohol content.
I think it's a flavor thing. I think people assume more flavor. That flavor comes from the alcohol, which isn't true either. There are dark beers out there are higher in alcohol, but I agree that the darkness has nothing to do with the alcohol content.
Well, it doesn't have to do with like the shillings and like 60 shillings, 80 shillings, and they would use darker malts as the beers got. I thought it had to do with like Britain. I don't know at this point, but
I'll take that as a homework assignment. We'll talk about it.
There we go.
I'll look it up and see where that started.
Yeah, I still want to know what the hell is going on with the fact that this beer does not have any nitro in it. It says it's got. I'm reading this right now. It says nitrogen. Man, that's a big word. Nitrogenated for smoothness, but I definitely do not have the same beer you have, Chris.
Well, they do say on Wikipedia, I know that's not the Bible. Wikipedia does say it's one of the top selling beers in the world.
Hey, if it's on the Wikipedia, it has to be true.
In 2011, that year alone, they sold 220 million gallons of Guinness Stout.
For as popular as it is, that's not too terribly surprising.
It says what made them unique at the time is they used a roasted barley and a non-roasted barley. Mm-hmm. They used both. Mm-hmm. So now let's go back to the beer. My opinion goes way back. And again, I've been drinking beer a long time, in the 40-year range. And I probably had this 30 some years ago and just probably drank a half of one. And I don't think I've had one again until now. And again, my palate has changed drastically in the last 10 years since I've been brewing beer and craft beers. This is much more drinkable than it would have been back in the day. If anything, I'd agree with Joey. It is a little watery. It doesn't have, a real, what we had last week had a lot more flavor to it. And even then, last week's beer we didn't think was super strong, but it obviously, I think it was 7% alcohol, which makes a little bit of difference. But last week's beer, we even talked about being a lawnmower beer. This is even more so than that, actually.
I was just about to say that this might be one of those. I wouldn't necessarily say that I would come in from working outside, or, if I was like hot and sweaty, this would not be the beer that I would reach for. But how about this would be a beer with dinner? If you're sitting down to dinner, you're having fish, steak.
I could drink this.
I could drink that as dinner. Yeah, I could drink this with dinner.
This is a dark Rolling Rock. I mean, this is
Rolling Rock. Wow.
Rolling Rock to me is a very watery beer, and I would, in the light colored beers. This is obviously, I would put this in a dark Rolling Rock. I mean, this is a dark beer that likes country music. It's just, it's just there.
It's just there.
It's just there.
It's just meh. I mean, that's how I would categorize.
I'm not going to say again. It still tastes better to me. I'd rather have this than a Bud Light.
That's fair.
That is definitely fair. I'm been sitting here bad mouthing this beer, and I've actually been kind of guilty of doing that for a time or two. It's because I honestly feel like the beer I brew tastes better because I brew it to my taste buds.
Right.
So
beer snob.
No, and it's not even necessarily that. I just know what I like, and I would say though I don't know. I'm not like I said, I'm not a big stout drinker. This is like a Bud Light stout to me. This is a beer. If you would say you're not a stout drinker, give this one a shot. It's the entry into stouts. Which is, me not being a stout drinker, I will admit I like this. I mean,
right. Which is what we said last.
I mean, I can't.
There you go.
I can't say it's that bad. I mean, I've drank it in like 5 minutes.
Plow through the whole thing. Goodness.
Which is what I said last week about the IPA. Last week's beer to me was a starter IPA. To me, this is a starter stout.
Okay.
I would agree with that. I mean, but at the same point in time, like a lot of people come in the store, they say, "How do I brew a beer like Guinness?" Just like how do I make a Busch Light or how do I make a Corona? Or a lot of new people who want to get into brewing give me these beers as examples. Shock Top's a big one. You know, the list goes on and on and on of really commercial beers. And I know a lot of recipes that have this, you know, have the roasted barley. They will add gypsum, which I believe adds hardness to the water to help replicate the water profile that comes from Ireland. I actually believe Guinness nowadays brews it here in the States. I don't think that they still make it. I'm looking. This one actually says brewed in Ireland. So
Mine did too.
you know,
Yeah,
that
mine
being
too.
said, there's a lot of things that we can do. Acidulated malt, I believe, is another thing that is a lot of times it adjusts the pH of the mash when you're doing an all grain version of Guinness. So I mean, it's a good beer, and I probably sound like a broken record now, but you know, whatever gets you brewing. If this is the beer style you want to brew, then go for it. I mean, today just goes to show you don't have to have nitrogen. Obviously, now they're carbonating the darn thing. So
now, I'll in like I said, in beer recipes, if you Google, I'm guessing it's like other things. You know, if you Google recipes for chocolate chip cookies, you find hundreds, and they all make probably a pretty good chocolate chip cookie. I'm guessing if you research a recipe for to brew a Guinness, there's more than one recipe out there. Is that true? I mean, I'm sure there's one that's closer if you have the exact recipe, but I'm guessing Guinness doesn't give that out. So you home brewers, are you
we're making educated
sampling
guesses.
Yeah.
Okay. Based
I would
on what
assume-
you've tasted.
There's
Yeah.
actually a brewery out there that I very much respect. It's a Mattre. It's here. I believe it's in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Yeah,
They
Mattre's
actually
in-
release. If you go to their website and you type in one of their beers, like Psychopathy, I think is one of them, they actually give you a homebrew recipe for it. The only thing they don't tell you is what yeast strain they use. If you call them, they will give you a very good hint as to what yeast strain that they use.
Okay.
That's interesting.
So that's pretty awesome. A lot of people, I mean, just straight from their website. Some breweries do it. I believe Pliny the Elder is another one of those. The guy who put that recipe together has that recipe for release.
Yeah, from Russian River.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So some breweries do. Obviously, the big ones like Guinness and, it's kind of like the KFC. It's a secret, recipe that you can't know the 13 spices or however many it's in it. But the recipes for Guinness, is, to my knowledge, are just very educated guesses as to what's going on in there.
I mean, and just looking at it, I mean, if I were to guess, I mean, so we're talking what, like 4 and some change in terms of ABV?
I think that's what Mark had said.
Yeah, so what, and some roasted barley. So if it's light in alcohol content, I would guess 4.2. I would guess that total grain bill would be somewhere in like the 8 to 9 pound range. Like you're probably talking about like 6 pounds of 2-row, couple pounds of some roasted barley, somewhere in there to give you the flavor, give like that malty flavor, but also give you the color that you see here. It doesn't smell like overly hoppy. It doesn't taste overly hoppy as well. So I would assume maybe in ounce and a half tops in terms of hops. So I would, if I were a betting man, I would think you could probably brew 5 gallons of this for in like the $20 to $25 range maximum. Would you concur with that, Joey?
Yeah. The only things that sometimes surprise me is the stouts use more grains than you think, because with home brewing you have base grains, which is basically where you're getting the alcohol from. And that's where I would agree with you, Chris. We're probably talking 6, 7, maybe 8 pounds of base grains, depending on your efficiency. But what's weird about stouts is they will use a lot of specialty grains, which will give you the color. And I'm actually shocked with some of the recipes I see how much are truly in it. This is being as jet black as, the color is on this. I haven't seen a recipe for one in a while, but I think it would probably be closer to the 10-pound range total for a 5-gallon batch. But it's really tough. It's really tough to tell. Obviously, a lot of these beers are commercialized beers, so cost is a factor for these breweries. I did want to say that, I keep talking about the nitrogen. As home brewers, we typically brew we typically use CO2 to carbonate our beers. And with nitrogen, it's different than CO2. That's what gives that nice creamy head that Chris's beer has and that me and Mark's don't. I'm not saying there isn't nitrogen in there, but if you're a brewer, you can see that.
I've got 3 other cans. I'll bring your can down by the end of the week. I'll come down to the store and drop one off for you.
I will say though, the overall flavor is still, nitrogen is known for being kind of light on the palate versus carbonation. You get that carbonation bubble. This is kind of velvety like the nitrogen, but it does kind of, without getting the beer burps, it does still have that carbonation to me, but I'm probably wrong. I guess I'm not Guinness.
And I'd like it,
the wrong beer.
And if I were to, kind of build off of this, I mean, one of the things that I've typically liked in the few stouts that I've had, what was I think I've had it, was it the Baptista, Big Bad Baptista or something like that? A lot of those, I prefer having that sweet finish, like with the lactose, like when they add that in there. Like I would prefer something like that. At least that's my preferred taste. So if I were to brew something, similar to this, or even take a clone recipe of Guinness, I might add that in there just to something that, to kind of, bring it more into something that I would like. Similar to, and the same thing that most folks do with, like, as you see with stouts nowadays, everyone's going for like the, coffee stouts or something like that. Exactly.
Right.
Where you have those additives that kind of, that bring it into, a flavor regime that you like.
Mm-hmm.
So if Guinness if the base Guinness is not what you like, I mean, there are so many different ways that you can take it in order to turn it into something that wouldn't add a ton of cost to your grain building if you were to show up at HBYOB and say, hey, I want to make Guinness, but I like this.
Mm-hmm.
And you can twist it to how, whatever you'd like.
Yeah. That's the thing. Like I said, it's just off-putting to me to see this soapy looking head from I can't get over it. I'm stuck on it. But being that, like I said, this beer drinks, it doesn't, if you told me to close my eyes and drink this beer, I'm not sure I would guess, because I'm not getting the chocolate, the coffee, the flavors you typically get from the dark malts. So for this beer to be this dark in color, if I close my eyes, other than it just being kind of a little bit heavier and velvety on the palate, I'm not sure I could guess this was a stout if my eyes was closed, if you want me to be honest.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. But again, this goes back to what we were discussing, like, just maybe like 5-10 minutes ago, because it's not something that we drink all that often. And we've been kind of, bragging on it, like since, before we started really drinking it. It's just, if we're not used to drinking something like this style, for one, in this particular beer, two, it would be kind of those off-putting things where it's like, well, I don't really recognize this, because you're expecting, if somebody were to say this is stout, we're expecting the coffee, we're expecting the vanilla, we're expecting the barrel age, we're expecting, all those different things that you see nowadays in commercialized stouts, that if you were to just drink that, I mean, you probably wouldn't even know what you had, like if you were to do like the blind taste challenge.
That I totally agree. And I guess where I'm going with it is I was actually talking about this today with someone that came into the store. Some of the beers that got me into craft brewing, now when I drink them, I'm a little underwhelmed, because of all of the breweries that are out there that are upping the ante with brewing. Some of the beers that you had to go through that, here's what is not just the normal. You couldn't just do barrel aged, 14% alcohol, sour. You just couldn't cram it down people's throat because our palates weren't ready for them beers. So Guinness as a brewery, I respect. I mean, they were the first beer that wasn't, pale yellow, no hops, adjunct lagers that was sweeping the market at the time. So to have something that went against the grain, which, it's not like this brewery has been out short term, is pretty awesome to me.
I would say the only other brewery that I would say, or at least the analogy that I can kind of put to a beer like this, is like, remember, what was it? Maybe it's probably been 4 or 5 years now. Remember when Yingling came out? And everybody was just like scraping the shelves in order to get their 6-pack of Yingling once it came out here.
Now you have to let them know in Ohio, Yingling hasn't been here, but what, 4 or 5 years? Yingling's
Right.
been in a
I
lot
was
of
a guy
states.
that
Yeah.
if
Well, people
anyone
don't
was
know we're in
close to
Ohio,
Yingling,
right?
Yeah.
Yingling's been around a long time, but
Oh,
people around here,
and that's
when we
what-
say
and-
we haven't had it. We didn't have it till
Exactly. But then when you look at Yingling and like Yingling and what it is, I mean, it is not this, super complex beer. I mean, it's an amber lager, and they've had that recipe for, generations. Oldest brewery in America. And, it's really nothing to write home about, but because of that, that shortened, that high demand for it here in Ohio, it's like once it got here, everybody, I mean, it was just everyone was fighting over it. And that's the only thing, that I could, compare Yingling to this, because again, if you were to just drink a Yingling, it'd be hard for you to sit there and say, oh yeah, that's definitely a Yingling. Same thing. It just doesn't have that wow factor to it as compared to the other types of commercialized, like craft beers that you get.
Yingling, again, when Yingling came here, me and Joey had really already started doing some beer making at the time. So our tastes were starting to change. But, I had a lot of buddies at that time, Yingling, to some of them, that was their step to a darker beer. I mean, because it was a little darker than Bud Light or Miller. So, some people would say, oh, it's a better tasting beer because it was a hair darker. I agree with Chris. It wasn't. It might have tasted different. It might have a little more flavor, but
it was just different enough. It was just different enough for folks to say, well, hey, maybe I'll try this. And then maybe, you'll take another step forward and maybe try something else down the line.
Well, it's one of those beers that I remember when it came. Chris, you introduced me to Yingling before it was even here in Ohio. And I remember when our buddy Ray, when we play cards with, every time somebody he visited or he was military or something, he would go to Pennsylvania or whatever. I'm like, bring me a case of that when you come back. I would pay him in advance to bring me Yingling when he came back. And I would say it's probably the beer that I still, if I go to a bar and they don't have, it's just one of those, if I'm in the mood to have dinner and not really think about anything, I probably drank Yingling more than any other beer out there.
That's one of my,
you did switch pretty drastically to Yingling when it came.
It was back to, when Yingling came here, you've seen every single table had at least one or two people drinking Yingling, because back to like what Chris had said, it was just different enough, but just enough the same of what we were already drinking.
Hey, you were sitting at the cool kids table when you had a Yingling.
Exactly. Now everyone's back to what they were drinking before. But even like my dad, who's been a Bud drinker his whole life, when we go out, he'll pick up a Yingling because he's trying to make that transition into it. And so I would say Yingling will probably be the biggest beer I'll defend to the. I love Yingling. I'm looking at the chat right now. Someone wants us to do a blind taste testing. I say, bring it on. I want to do it because I would say Yingling, PBR, and Coors Light, and those are the only three. If we're talking like, big breweries, those are the only three I can identify. The rest, I would even be willing. Hold on. And I would be willing to do a blind taste test and say I can taste Yingling, the difference from bottle to can to draft. I've been saying that for years, and I want to do that challenge. I remember that.
Well, yeah, I want to do that challenge. I can't do it, and I don't believe you can do it, so we're gonna have to do it.
And it's probably placebo, but I think I can do it.
Okay, but let's go back to the beer we're talking tonight. First of all, because you just said blind taste test, I don't think any of us would have picked this out as even being a dark beer. Meaning, if we didn't know what we were being served, if we just had to say, what style of beer, I agree. I'm not sure I would have even said stout. If I didn't know it was a Guinness. So, it is a pretty mellow stout. The next thing I'm going to ask both of you is, again, the reason we did this is back to St. Patty's Day. If I hadn't done this tonight and I was going to St. Patty's Day bar, and they said, do you want one of the green Bud Lights or would you want a Guinness? Before tonight, I said, give me the green beer. I just, in my mind, didn't think I would want the Guinness. I now would say, give me the Guinness. I think I'd drink a Guinness over a green Bud Light at my local bar on this St. Patty's Day. that's your choice now, guys. That's why we did this. If you go to a bar on St. Patty's Day and you have the option between a Bud Light that's dyed green or a Guinness Draft, which would you drink?
Can I go first, Chris?
Go ahead.
I think you're gonna agree with me. If beads are being handed out at this event and green beer was served, sorry, I'm going with green beer. If we're going to a steakhouse to have dinner on a St. Patty's Day, I'll go with the Guinness. Is that fair enough?
I think that's fair. I think that's fair.
I guess it comes down to what's my mission for the night, to drink beer
I'm guessing Dayton, Ohio is not the only one, but I know one of our local bars here does, they advertise pretty big the green beer and green hot dogs, which I've yet to eat a green hot dog. And I think I'd rather just have give me a slider and now a Guinness, and I'll be happy with that.
My sister and I, we've gone down to the Dub Pub, the Dublin pub, down near the Oregon district, for the last few years on St. Patty's Day, and they'll have stuff like that there. And I would still agree with Joey though. I mean, depends on what your mission is for the evening. So you might want to go out and get yourself a Guinness. You might want to go out and get yourself a green beer, depending on what your objectives are. So, but I will say this. I mean, I would say my opinion has changed on Guinness after having it tonight. I mean, it's still not something that I would go out, if I'm, going through, Kroger or something like that, hey, I'll grab a 6-pack of it. Still not what I would do. But, if it's available somewhere and, I might sit down and have a pint here and there.
A couple people I've heard from really, and I guess I would now like to find a bar or pub that actually has Guinness on real draft, not this, not the bottle draft or the canned. I think I'd like to try this on draft just to get an opinion of it being a little more carbonated. Because a lot of people do say the American, which again, I agree with Joey. My bottle says, that it's from Ireland, but everything I've heard from people who have been to Ireland say, and again, is it a mental thing? I don't know, but they say if you have a Guinness there, it doesn't even, it's not even close to being the same beer that we get here. Mm-hmm. Again, not sure if that's the case, but I have heard that from more than one person.
I've heard that about a lot of German beers too. And I think it kind of goes back to what we were discussing earlier. It's the same thing with the green beer. If we're drinking at noon, the green beer is awesome. If we're drinking green beer with dinner, we're going to go, what is this gimmick all about? It goes back to that, it takes you back. People who talk about, German beers when, a lot of times I've heard a lot of people in the armed forces when they've had German beers when they were deployed here or there, it reminds them of a place and the time they were at. So you can't replicate that situation and who you was with at that time. But being able to drink a Guinness when you're here in the States, you say, it wasn't as good when I was in Ireland, but you're not in Ireland, you're here in the States. So is there truth to it? Probably, but it kind of goes back to that placebo effect. Is there actual blind taste truth to it? I don't think we'll ever be able to know that. I know people who spend, hundreds of dollars to have pizza from New York, overnighted to them and all kinds of crazy things like that. So it's tough to say. I would think someone can make a pretty darn good pizza here in Ohio, even though we're not New York. If it's a New York style pizza, probably wrong.
Now here's what the other thing that's kind of good though is 2 years in a row we've gone to the local bar here in my town the day after St. Patty's Day, and they give you $1 off the green pitcher because they're trying to get rid of it and get the lines empty. So day old green beer, $1 cheaper a pitcher. I'm down with that anyway.
So we have in the chat there, do they serve it warm? I actually prefer Guinness warm. I don't put my Guinness in the refrigerator. So I don't know if that answers your question or not, but I don't put my Guinness in the refrigerator.
Now, the bottle says serve chilled. And I understand it's that's always an opinion. I have seen some beers that specifically have a temperature on them and actually will say, between 50 and 55 degrees or between, 35 and 45. This doesn't say that, but mine does say, enjoy chilled, so, but I agree. I kind of knew that ahead of time. Like I said, I did not sit mine out all day. It wasn't room temperature, but I did get it out about a half hour before the show. So I'm sure mine was probably in that 50-ish degrees. And I agree. That's what I would drink this at probably anyway. So I enjoyed it though.
I would say a beer like this does impact the taste when it gets warm. You'll watch a lot of people, and I'm not a beer judge, but you'll see a lot of people, hold the glass and they'll get it warm with their hands.
Mm-hmm.
You see that a lot because there are a lot of aromas and flavors that you just don't get when it's ice cold. I'm really okay. I might as well, bash the big guys, but when you're drinking a cheap adjunct lager, you want that as cold as possible, smooth as possible. You don't want that beer like that getting warm, because all it's going to bring out are off flavors in the beer potentially. But yeah, if you have a beer that's got a lot of hops or a lot of malts, when you get it warm, it can really pull out some flavors and aromas that, if you appreciate beer and what goes into that, you'll actually in ways enjoy the beer more. It's kind of weird to some people drink warm beer, but I actually prefer, I'll pour myself a glass of beer and it sits on my table for usually 5 minutes before I even start drinking it, in any style of beer, in all honesty.
My daughter,
ice cold, you don't taste it.
Right. My daughter for Christmas got me one of those mugs you put in the freezer. And now that I don't drink those kind of beers anymore, I don't use that. And she'll come over every once in a while, she'll just say, I don't even know why I bought that mug. I've never seen you use it, so every once in a while I'll get that out and pour one of the, Miller Genuine Drafts or something that might be in the refrigerator and drink it out of that just to show her I've used it. But you're right. It's not something I would use with any of, the beers I drink most of this day. Like the Grater's beer. I've had another one of the blueberries. That to me tastes a lot better as it got warmer. You actually could smell more blueberry, had more taste. So, I agree. It doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be that 35 degrees, which to me, then, I actually think we gave this beer higher review than some of us thought. But at the same time, if you say it's going to taste better warmer, isn't that almost giving it a little higher praise? Meaning it's going to have more flavor, meaning, you're saying, I think it's warm. I liked it. Yeah. That type thing. That means it has better ingredients in it.
It has potential. I mean, it has potential to be a little bit better than what we originally thought it would be.
This beer is crafted. This beer makes me respect the amount of quality that goes into this. This is not a beer that, it's why I respect, InBev, is because yes, they make, cheap adjunct lagers, which we've discussed this before, and I'm not trying to beat the same drum, but they do a good job at it. It's consistent.
Right.
And to be able to make a beer as a home brewer, to make that beer style is very, very, I'm not saying impossible, but close to it, because it's perfectly crafted, and I respect that.
But the last, we're going to have to move on. But the last thing I'll say about this beer, back to I'm a much older beer drinker than you guys. I have gone through, in my life, this is the second craft beer, home brew / fancy beer phase that's been in my beer drinking period. Meaning I went through it like 25 years ago when there was, and that lasted for a while and then went out. But so it's a little hard for me to explain this to you guys, but I do remember drinking beer long enough ago where, this was as close to what you guys would now consider a craft beer in a grocery store that you could buy. 35 years ago, if you wanted anything that wasn't, standard American, pale beers, this has always been on the shelf. As long as I can remember, you could get a Guinness. So for someone, so you have to give them some credit for that. And if this fad that and maybe it's not a fad, I do think nowadays we do these things last longer and maybe forever. Maybe people will just say, no, we just want better beer. But the last time the fad went away, Guinness didn't. If you still wanted that style of a beer, you had to go with, a Guinness was going to be there.
Which I don't think this is my opinion, but I don't think good quality beer was ever a fad. I think Prohibition killed the craft brewing industry. And when Prohibition ended, we're now still playing catch up.
No, I'm telling you for a fact, 30 years ago, there were little brew houses around Dayton, Ohio. You could go places and buy, Very, very few, but it was, and I hate to use the word fad because I know you guys don't want to say this is a fad we're in right now. I'm just saying for a while, you could get some fancier beers. There were a few, and I'll say a very few grocery stores where you could go and get a selection of beer, but it happened over a little period of time and they were there for a while. Then it just went away. Not enough people, still more people wanted Budweiser, and those type beers. This has gone longer. I'll give you that. And there are more people into it, and some of the breweries are sticking. And I think what makes this period in my mind seem like it's going to last longer is the big guys are buying them. That didn't happen the first time this happened in my life, where there were local breweries. These local breweries have gotten popular, and then some have gotten bought by the big guys. And I think that's because the big guys realize, people's taste, back to the internet and information, there's enough stuff out there to keep something like this going compared to, what happened, 30 years ago.
Well, I think that's a whole nother topic. When I like to say, and it's my opinion, that when Prohibition ended, not only when Prohibition ended, did the big guys who survived it that did other things, they also had marketing money that the little guys didn't. They didn't have a chance. So it took 30, 40, 50 years to re-educate the market that, hey, your local brew pub. I mean, nowadays farm to table, cooking. We just went to we was right by Dublin Pub, Chris, the other day, and we chose a restaurant that had very good local fresh food. We didn't choose the Outback Steakhouse, all these big franchises. It wasn't because we're hipsters. I'm the farthest thing from a hipster. It was because we are aware of what we're putting in our bodies, I think, more now than ever, and so it just takes some catching up and now you don't see Budweiser spending, millions of dollars at the Super Bowl or anything like that. I mean, I'm still sure that they're spending a lot of money on advertising, but people are willing to give things a little bit that they don't hear about a chance more than ever, I think. And it took time. It just took some time.
Right. All right. I'm going to give it up, again, definitely. I think I'll buy a 6-pack or so and have it here for, St. Patrick's Day.
I will say one thing about this beer is I will finish this 6-pack pretty quickly. 2 of them went down the hatch tonight, but the rest of them will disappear pretty quickly. That Alpha King that we had, it took me some time to get through the rest. And I defend Three Floyds because Zombie Dust, which might be my favorite beer so far, and I can't believe that I'm agreeing with the masses, but the Alpha King I had, like I said before, was old, so I don't count that.
Whatever. Chris, what's your last opinion on now? I know last time you weren't able to buy one bottle of what we reviewed. Did you have to buy a 6-pack, a 4-pack? What?
I got a 6-pack of the of the Guinness.
Yeah,
I got a 4-pack of cans, and this one actually does say on the side of the can that it has a round plastic widget in every can that unleashes nitrogen throughout the beer. So make sure, folks at home, that you check and make sure that it has the widget in there.
Now, I did look online real quick. The widget Guinness was the first brewery to put that in a mass, distributed beer, and they did originally just put it in their cans. It does say they do have some versions of bottles out there with it. The widget description is pretty, it is a small,
it's unique.
It's a small plastic piece with at least a hole going all the way through it. Some have more than one hole. That's like the whole description of the widget. Yeah. And it is just to kind of, keep, I assume just to keep some airflow or keep some bubbles going in there, it sounds like. But
yeah, it seems like I would assume whenever you crack open the can, then the oxygen that comes in starts to interact with it, releases the nitrogen, and then you get the nice foamy release that you get from the can. But on the beer itself, I mean, again, like I said earlier, my opinion, complete 180. I mean, if this would be something that I would just try and avoid as much as possible, but if somebody were to offer me, a beer, can of this, I would take it. This could be something that I'll probably wind up finishing, by the end of the week, because this is pretty good.
Now, only because you said it, and I thought about it earlier, and then you guys went on that nitrogen. If you home brew, is that something you can do rather than CO2? Is there a way to use that for carbonation?
You
I
can.
haven't used it that way.
You can. It's just not common. They do sell the nitrogen canisters. I think it's mixed with argon. There's still CO2 in it. I think it's like 70-30 nitrogen to CO2. I don't know the correct ratio.
Okay.
I know that the widget that I had in the bottle I had, back to being a home brewer, Guinness was the beer I drank the most. And the reason why is because these label. Oh, shoot. These used to just be a plastic sleeve. Yeah, they are.
Mine is. Right. You can cut this off.
You could cut this right off as a home brewer to not peel labels. And the widget I only knew because I would take a pair of needle nose pliers and just pull the widget right out of there. It looked like those rockets you used to shoot off in high school.
Right.
Just a couple wings, and you just would pull them.
Pull it all out.
I love Guinness for homebrew bottles. It was the best bottle. Pop top. Widget came out, and then you just took a knife right down the side. You were good to go. No peeling labels.
What would this bottle? What does a bottle cost? If I go to HBYOB, I'm assuming I can buy a 12-pack of a bottle like this. So, what's the value of this bottle as a home brewer? I used to do that before I did cornies. I would keep these type bottles, because they weren't screw-on tops, so you could reseal them.
So we sell a case of 24 for $12.99. So what is that, like 50, just over 50 cents a bottle?
All right. So 50 cents a bottle. The 6-pack was $9.99. Mm-hmm. So, that's $1.50. All right. So if I keep the bottle and use it, deduct that from the price. It's not a bad beer for $1.
Hey, that's, I like I said, I've drank many cases of Guinness just so I could snag the bottle.
There you go.
And I knew they had a widget just because I was prying them out with needle nose pliers.
And then last thing, I guess we should. What's the difference in the draft and the nitro? Because there was a 6-pack of both when I bought this. I could have bought the nitro, and it just says Guinness Nitro, right on the bottle. Is it because they use more nitro? When I read on, nitro supposedly was used for this also. But is it? Do you have any idea?
So all I gathered. Go ahead, Chris.
If I had to guess, I would go along the lines that you were thinking, Mark, that there just might be a higher concentration of nitrogen in there.
Nitro?
Yeah, that'd be my guess.
So the only thing I've gathered, if you're going to get a tip from today, is get your Guinness in a can. I love the can in brewing. It sounds to me like the cans are where the widgets and the nitro is. So if you want a true, authentic Guinness, which is what I'm calling a true, authentic Guinness in my 8 years of drinking Guinness, get your Guinness in a can. That's the tip for the day. All
right, tip for the day. All right, we're going to wrap it up here. We need to... and unfortunately, we need to come up with a few beers and let people know, in the future what we're going to be talking about. We should have maybe discussed that before the show. Do you guys have an opinion or any thing that you want to do, or has anybody in the chat room come up with a particular beer that maybe we need to try to get to review next week?
From what I saw is, some folks that if they do happen to make their way down to HBYOB or put up on the HBYOB Facebook page, maybe we could start a poll up there and kind of, do some,
okay. And I think that's good, but I think we need to let people know a week in advance. So if they want to go get one, they could have it. So, we probably need to, and maybe we don't have anything yet in mind. I just thought, well, if one of you two, because the Guinness, the other beer, I want to say, is it called Grolsch? Is there a Grolsch stout? I remember again, also as a very young beer drinker, it was one of the first beers that I bought that had that ceramic top on it. And I bought it only because of that. I took about 2 drinks, poured that shit out, and used the bottle. And again, I was probably 20 years old. So it's been a long time. I have seen it in stores here and there, but I don't know, not that I can recall recently. So I'm assuming it's still a beer made. Same thing, just because it's a beer I tried years ago. I'd be curious, now if it's something I would drink or not. I'm sure I would drink it now compared to in the past. I would have not, I did pour it out. It was just, it wasn't even close to Jobel, which is what my beer. And again, I don't even think Goebbels. I don't think you can buy Goebbels anymore. I know some of those old beers in the Dayton area are coming back. You can get Stroh's now. You can get Hugh de Paul. You can, Hugh Delight.
Robin Hood Cream Ale.
Oh man,
yeah. Robin Hood Cream Ale is. I've had a fight with old Sir Robin. Years ago.
I've fought the Little Kings that got the
Little Kings. I wasn't, and we talked about that. I was a Little Kings guy. I did Little Kings a long time, but so one more time. Is there a beer out there one of you guys have already thought about, or something we want to do for sure next week, or we just gonna come up with something at the end?
I'll throw it out there since we were talking about beers that we used to drink but don't really drink now because they're underwhelming. I'll take it all the way back to the beginning. Joey, you know which one I'm about to say right now. Sierra Nevada Pale Ale.
Done and done.
Okay. All right. Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, which again, I'll go back to Joey. The beer snob where we worked, when me and Joey were trying to figure out how to drink the cheapest Natty Light that we could come up with. There we worked with somebody that, and we both have not apologized, but we both have admitted to him that, all right, he probably was drinking a better beer than we were. Just at the time, we just thought that was,
we thought he was trying to show his manhood through it. And I remember drinking.
I still think he was.
Now knowing what I know now, or where my head is now, I don't agree. Just because it is one of, I agree.
He was Dayton famous. Dayton famous.
I'm agreeing with both Mark and Chris in this. The first time I drank Sierra Nevada, I went, "Who can drink this? This stuff is terrible." I couldn't stand it, and now it's been probably, in all honesty, maybe a year since I've had it. And the last time I had it, I went, "That's it." I was back to underwhelmed, but it was the beer that got me going. So, and for a long time, it was a recipe I was trying to duplicate and I never got it right. And so I agree with Chris. Let's do Sierra Nevada Pale Ale.
All right. So that's what we will be reviewing. And again, I don't know what the word is. We want to get away from a root. None of us are beer experts. We're just, three guys that drink beer. Our tastes have changed over the years since we've kind of got into brewing and doing different things.
I'll just say we're taste testing. How about that? We're taste testing.
We're just trying to give people out there a description of our palate. I wanted to use the word twice tonight.
Take a look at you.
So that's where we will go next week. Should be Tuesday night about the same time. We'll get in here and talk about that. One place we'll go quick before we end the show is just back to the brewing. Joey at HBYOB. If someone again wants to try to make a Guinness or a stout of this type, I'd assume they can come in, tell you they heard the show, saw the show now, but you probably have everything they need to make that. So why don't you tell them, where to find you, how to get a hold of you, and if they're interested in this recipe to, give you a call.
So you can find us on the web at hbyob.com. All of our social media is typically HBYOB or HBYOB937. And the stores here in the Dayton, Ohio area, by the Dayton Mall at 123 Springboro Pike. Come visit us in the store.
All right. Great. Chris, and we didn't mention it, me and Chris do a fantasy sports show, talk a lot about football and everything. We do that once a week, but go ahead and let everybody know how to get a hold of you, maybe where to read some of your information on fantasy.
You can find all of my work at ffcouchcoach.com, and also I started doing some work for fantrax.com as well. And then I actually just got a position with Draft Day Consultants. It's for anybody, if you're drafting a fantasy team, it allows us to work with you as consultants in order to draft the team that you'd like. And then they also provide in-season team management if you're looking for that type of help as well.
You have to get Joey's email, help him out.
Oh yeah, I mean, I tried to help him a couple of years ago, and he wouldn't take my advice. But but you can find me on Twitter at Chris Allen FFWX.
All right, and I'm Easy Kill. I'm on Twitter, Fantasy Fan. or you can find us on the website, fantasyfan.com. Again, I think we'll be doing a show, I think, tomorrow evening on fantasy sports. I've enjoyed drinking the stout tonight. I think the guys enjoyed it probably a little more even than they were willing to admit or thought they would. We're glad you all were here for our first live YouTube, broadcast. If you watch this, if you didn't watch it live, you're watching it recorded, leave a comment or anything. We'll check those. And we hope that you'll come back and see us live in the future. Again, this has been HBYOB Brewcast. I thank Chris Allen, Joey Brumley. This is Easy Kill. We'll see you next week. Don't brew and drive.